Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon or good morning. I'm showing 2 o'clock here on the East Coast, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Patricia Julianell. I am the Senior Strategist for Program Advancement and Legal Affairs at Schoolhouse Connection, and I am here with Fallon Stewart. Fallon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fallon, and I work with an organization in Medford, Oregon. We're called the Maslow Project, and we are the official McKinney-Vento liaison for several school districts in our area. So we wear that hat, and we also provide a level of social supports for all of our youth as well. So basic needs, resource navigation, and family case management and advocacy to hopefully help stabilize them and get them into permanent housing.
Thank you, Fallon. And I want to welcome everyone to our conversation today. I see some names that I recognize from last week, others that are new. So in case you're not familiar with our format, this is going to be a short webinar, just 30 minutes long. Fallon and I are just going to have a conversation. She's going to share with us some of her secret strategies and hot tips, things that they're doing over in Medford. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions and conversation. So at any time throughout our conversation, please feel free to type a question into the questions pane. And also, if any of our conversations just kind of inspire something for you that you'd like to share, something that you're doing in your school or your district or your community, please type that into the chat, because we're all here for the opportunity to learn from Fallon, but it also creates an opportunity for us to learn from each other. So please do type in with much enthusiasm into the questions pane and also the chat. So just to start us off, Fallon, I wonder, one of the things that I'm really personally worried about, and I think a lot of people are, is students that we have lost since, gosh, almost a year ago now, since last March when schools switched to distance learning. And a lot of students just kind of never signed on to distance learning, and some of them have never come back to school, to education, whether it be in person or distance. And so I'm wondering what you're doing to find those students and to re-engage them, bring them back into school, whether that be, hybrid, distance, or in person.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that we have been targeting this year specifically. We recognized that there were lower sort of enrollment numbers across the board, but we knew that like those kids didn't go anywhere. They're still around. They're just not in school, right? So what we did was we did some data pulling from students who were enrolled and identified last year and then should have re-enrolled this year. And we pulled that list of students and compared it with our enrollment for this year. So we knew exactly who we were supposed to be looking for first. And then we would break down that list and see like, who do we already have a personal connection with? So that'll be an easy, we'll find them, we'll call them, we'll reach out to them. And then who is new to us and we're not sure who they are, we can work with the school to see if any school staff have a connection with them, to see who might be the best person to reach out, who has a personal connection. And then we just hit the ground running. We literally, our staff, because we're also a nonprofit, we are able to have a social media presence. So we've been reaching out to youth through Facebook Messenger, through Instagram, texting. Some of our staff, because they work with many families, like know where the last place that youth might have had a job. Not that we would say just show up at a job and demand to talk to a kid, but we might peek by just to see like, hey, are they working? Grab a soda or whatever and be like, hey, call me after work, here's my card. Like just try to find them where they might be and make a connection. That way, you get eyes on them. You're like, okay, well, I know that they're around, they're safe, quote unquote, for right now. So you kind of get that, the visual for them, and then we can start having the conversation.
It sounds a little bit like detective work.
It does feel a little bit like detective work, always done with respect and integrity. But yeah, like we're worried about the kids, and we know that what is happening to them potentially when they're not in school is definitely worth spending that time. And,
right. Yeah. And I like the emphasis that you put on the relationship, like to the extent possible. Not everyone can always do that, depending on the district or the community, but to find that person who has a relationship and have that person do the outreach, because who's gonna, nobody's gonna respond to me if they don't know who I am. I'm just some lady from the office, right? Why are you gonna call me back,
Right. And the other thing is there's a few hubs in our community where youth tend to kind of hang out. like there's a place called Joe's Place in Josephine County, for example, and they have often interfaced with some of the students that we work with. So we would stop in or call Joe's Place and be like, hey, just so you know, we're trying to reconnect kids with school, and there's lots of options, but as a community agency, they may not be completely up to par on like all the things that schools have to offer. So making sure that those key youth providing agencies also know what's going on and how to get a hold of us if they see a youth who should be engaging in school, who they don't think is participating, so that we can reach out and make sure, and that warm handoff sometimes is really then crucial there. So finding those hubs, still doing outreach, like, you know, figuring out where kids are going, obviously keeping in touch with our shelters to let them know, even if a family's staying in shelter, we have options for school. DHS and like other social service agencies reach out to us often as well.
Those partnerships, I'm sure, are so important, because that's really expanding your team, your eyes and ears now. Instead of however many you have just on your team, now you've got exponentially more because of all those community partners.
Exactly. Yeah, letting all of the community partners know. So, you know, if we get information from the school, there's people who are, you know, helping families enroll in social programs like temporary cash assistance or SNAP, and they recognize that those parents now have their children and how challenging that can be when you already have many things you're dealing with daily, and then being your child's teacher is now just one of those things. Obviously, we would like to connect those students with their school education entity, wherever's closest.
That's awesome. So you've just given me about 50 different strategies to reach out to families and students. But before I move on to the next question, are there any other strategies for outreach that you're doing that you wanted to share?
I think for we also do like just general posts. Like, so if the school district shares something with us that's helpful for the kids to know, we'll share that information out on our social media. So it gives the families an opportunity to just engage like organically through that, like not necessarily having to go through us, just making it available to them through another platform. Plus we also have, of course, our bilingual staff that we're using to make sure that we're reaching that demographic as well. I don't know if that was, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to add.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate that addition of the bilingual staff. That's so important. So tell me a little bit, once you find these students, you know, you run into them at work or through a community agency or however, and then you want to draw them back into school. So you want to get them connected to what you're offering and then keep them motivated to attend. Because, I mean, at least when I went to school, you know, I wasn't there because I really wanted to do my math homework. I wanted to do my clubs, and I'd see my friends and hang out and get out of my house for a little while, to be honest. Not that there was anything, you know, I was fortunate enough to have a safe and stable environment, which many of our students do. For them, getting out of the house is a whole other issue of having someplace to be safe and someplace to be warm and to have food. So without all of that, you know, if you're virtual, how do you get the students enrolled, but then keep them attending and keep them engaged?
Yeah, that has been probably the biggest challenge, I would say, at any point for a multitude of reasons. But what we have found works is coming into the conversation with just unconditional positive regard. Students generally know that they're supposed to be in school, right? They generally know that they should be attending. That's not a shocker. And I think kids will attend and do well when they can, when they're able to. So first we just be like, hey, like it's been forever since we've seen you. What's going on? How are you doing? And then we first address all of those basic needs and make sure that we have asked them, you know, where are you guys eating dinner right now? Do you need all the basic needs supplies? We make sure we go through all of that first. And then we talk about, are you even able to connect to school? What does that look like for you? If you had a hotspot and a Chromebook from school, like, would you be able to do school? Like, do you have a place to sit during, like, to do school? And then how are we working through those little snags? Because what we're seeing, and I'm sure everybody in this room can echo, is that there's probably siblings also doing school at the same time. So how are we concentrating? We've also got maybe one hotspot and 3 computers. So how are we setting aside time to do things, and then there's asynchronous classrooms, and then there's synchronous classrooms, and then there's Lippy. So what is going to work? How we can help, because we're not in crisis in that moment. We can help organize a plan for that youth at that time, and hopefully then potentially find places where they can do school, whether that be public library. Like during the big COVID closure, it was just wherever you can find a quiet spot and make it work. And then we're problem solving the technology, and then we're encouraging them. And sometimes we use pretty like lifey incentives. We're finding a lot of our youth want to meet up with us, like to have a socially distanced lunch, but they don't expect that we're also bringing this like helpful packet of information on how to connect to your senior project. And like, so we bring things with the hope that they'll want to engage in a conversation around academic goals, but come to the table knowing that we're probably going to talk about a lot of other things first, and be willing to address those things kind of repeatedly. And what we're finding helps kind of motivate kids to get going are those incentives. Like, we'll meet with you for lunch and we'll do X, Y, and Z thing. We will meet you in the park with a coffee and we'll go over X, Y, and Z packet of information. Or recently, we were talking about having students who were in the same classes who were kind of not doing well coming together and doing a little tutoring sesh, and then they formed like oh, I'll help you do this if you help me do this. So providing like a Zoom connection for students who just didn't know each other but needed help in the same class.
Well, that's kind of cool. So you're helping, I guess, provide the tools for students to create community themselves. They're really doing that. They're saying, hey, I'll help you, you'll help me, and we'll come together. And you're just kind of providing a platform and, I guess, encouragement for that to happen organically.
Yep. With the guise of like, we're going to do some work if we can. And then they ended up taking their like, oh yeah, we'll meet like twice a week to make sure that the homework we're doing is right and help each other. And then, they took it from there. But being willing to even just host like very nonchalant office hours online, just having it open, kids can come in, and trying to have some focus of keeping things lighthearted. I have staff who literally will just send memes. Like, they'll just send memes to their kids every morning via text, like, hey, good morning, this made me laugh. Like, what's on your agenda today? What are you working on? And so they'll try to like keep it light. There's just so much heaviness happening in the world. It helps to relate to youth and just know that we're not just there to be like, did you do your math? Did you do your English? Like, to be lighthearted and just say happy birthday, just to say happy birthday, just to let it be something special.
Yeah, I feel like that really opens and then keeps the line of communications open. Because I was just talking to a youth the other day, and he was, he's having a little trouble with his work right now. He's a senior. He really wants to graduate, but he's having some trouble. And he was saying he really misses that opportunity to just go up to the teacher after class for like 5 minutes and just say, I missed this, or I didn't understand it, or I wasn't paying attention for 5 minutes and I missed this thing. Can you help me? And he said, his teachers, they have office hours, but he doesn't use them. And so I was like, okay, let's talk about that, because something is preventing you from using them. They're not working for you for whatever reason. What could be better? And he I think it really came down to that relationship. Like, even though it was an office hour, he kind of felt like he was imposing on the teacher. He didn't really want to reach out in that way. It just felt almost like a bigger commitment than just that quick 2 minutes after class, hey, can you go over this with me? And so it seems like if there were that kind of fun, lighthearted relationship, then maybe he wouldn't feel so bad getting online or picking up the phone during office hours and saying, hey, can you help me with this one thing?
Mm-hmm. And we definitely do a lot of coordinating with teachers to help kids connect to their teachers, because we are seeing that the protective layer of technology and that not being in person, that does kind of pose a barrier to the easiness of reaching out, like you just described. So kind of being like, hey, like, do you want to jump on a couple minutes before, talk about what you're going to say to your teacher, and then, check in with your teacher, and then come back and let me know how it went. Like, do you want me to send them an email and let them know you're going to check in and like kind of pave the path for you? It's really up to the student though. Some of them just need like a reminder and you can do this, like some encouragement. Others do need a little bit more of like modeling and that kind of thing. It just depends on the kid.
That makes sense. All right, I think I have just 2 more questions for you. We do have some questions coming in, which I'm super happy about. Please keep typing your questions in, everyone. We're going to get to them in just a sec. I wonder, my second to last question is, you talk so much about community partnerships, and you've already named quite a few groups in the community that you work with. But can you just reiterate for us key partners, first of all, even within the school? You've mentioned teachers as one, and then also in the community that are helping you engage with students and families experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, so one of the big things that happened in our community is we had the YMCA and a couple of other childcare provider type agencies that opened up their facility to be a space where kids could do work during the day in an approved childcare setting. So obviously these people who are, overseeing stuff, they're not teachers, but they were there to help kind of make sure that the student could plug in, log in, and
Right.
use their technology and stuff. So that has been awesome. Boys and Girls Club, I'm sure everywhere across the country has kind of things like this. And what we know too is that does come with a price often. So working with other community agencies, we wear this social work hat. So our agency in collaboration with the school district to make that accessible. Also with the limited in-person instruction, we've worked with our districts to prioritize high-risk, high-need students to be in person, because that really is who would benefit from that. And then within the district, they've formed, obviously having to go and follow all the protocols, but have formed like after school or some other like tutoring drop-in time where they can be assigned to a cohort of time that comes in outside of Libby. So there's been some creative problem solving there. And we've had some churches reach out to us that say, hey, do you know students who need a place to do school? And then they've kind of on their own set it up to be an avenue for youth and to come in and do work. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I feel like I want to put in a plug because, as you mentioned, sometimes there are costs involved with some of these programs, and sometimes there are transportation costs involved. So I want to put in a plug for those of you who are wondering, well, how do I pay for that? Collaborations with community agencies are great, getting donations, maybe using your McKinney-Vento grant, but also, we can use Title I, Part A set-aside funds to allow students to take advantage of educational opportunities. And right now, with schools on distance learning, having a place to go to do your schoolwork and have an adult help you connect and help you have that stable internet signal that you need, that's absolutely a legitimate expense to allow students to access educational programming. So I think if there's a fee for that or if transportation is required, I would encourage people to tap into their Title I Part A set aside and to also find out where is the Esther money in your district. So Esther stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Fund. That's that big $54 billion fund that Congress just approved in December. That's $54 billion of new money going out to schools and school districts around the country. And a specific allowable use of that funding is services to McKinney-Vento students. So find out who is holding that particular checkbook in your district and try to access some of those funds to support your students experiencing homelessness. That's my little plug for the day.
Something that we also discovered is that if a family receives temporary cash assistance, in our state we have employment-related daycare dollars, which can sometimes be applied to situations like this when they're going to a facility that's an approved child care provider. So sometimes the state would then pay the child care cost for them to be in that safe location during the day to do school.
Great idea. That's a great idea. Okay, my last question for Fallon, and then we're going to go to your questions for Fallon. I have been also really worried about attendance and how is attendance being calculated? We know that students experiencing homelessness a lot of times can't connect for all kinds of reasons that are not related to their perhaps desire to connect. It might just be that they're taking care of a little sibling. They might have an internet blackout in their motel. They've got a lot of stuff going on in their doubled up situation and they just can't connect right now. So I'm really worried about students who are just being counted absent because they can't connect to a synchronous class at a certain time. So How are your schools in your area calculating attendance, and what kind of flexibility is there to help students experiencing homelessness get credit for the work that they're doing and they're really trying to do, but maybe they can't actually log on at the right time every day?
Right. That's a really good question. I think in our area, we've been very lucky that there has been a lot of flexibility and a lot of options for what's considered to be marked present. So if, for example, a student can log into the Zoom but isn't going to turn their camera on as part of the requirement, then if they're at least participating in the chat or with the emoji prompts when the teacher is asking for there to be some sort of engagement, then they'll count that. If the student is going to watch it later, then for them to just let the teacher know via email. The district's been using Gmail with all students, and that's actually been going really well. Or if we have some students who we know are engaging in school and watching and participating later, then we can always, on behalf of that student, say, hey, I happen to know that this student participated in this X, Y, or Z. The biggest piece is communication to the teacher. It's less about like knowing you were right there at that moment when that lesson was being given, and more, did the student communicate with the teacher? Were they able to connect, to just touch base and be let know? Now, in terms of how they're actually like calculating attendance over time, it seems to be different for every district. I don't actually know how that's going to look at the end of the year, but it seems to be what they really want at the end of the day is the engagement piece. So they're looking for that in addition to just the checkbox that they were there.
Okay, that's really interesting. And that communication, I mean, that makes sense to me. That feels fair. Okay, let me go to our questions. If you have questions, please continue typing them in. We have quite a list here, so I might not get to them all, but I'll do my best. So one person is asking, some of the things that you talked about, Fallon, probably are a little bit more applicable maybe to your high school students than your younger students. And so we have a question about what changes do you make in your approach if you're talking about elementary level, or even, maybe even preschool, kindergarten, first grade, the really young children?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So we have staff who are working specifically with that age range and those families. And one of the things we do primarily is just calmly work with parents about all of their technology questions, concerns, needs, so our staff have taken time to learn how to use the technology and log in and all the various factors, because that too for us has come up as the primary thing. Like, the parents are very overwhelmed with all of the different platforms and the logins and feeling a lot of pressure there. So to make sure, one, that they know that we can be there to help support them, but two, also who to call if they can't get a hold of us at the district to help walk them through those things. And then also to problem solve with the parents around, what environment are you in? What can you do? And what do you feel is really just not possible right now, so that we can look at what the district can do to help support an environment for you guys, or at least make, if getting all three of your kids on this platform at this time is just not going to happen, would one of your kids do better if we gave them packets and do paperwork? Would one of your kids do better if we got them in this behavioral? So we have this really awesome thing a group of teachers are doing, where their job before closure was to do behavior intervention when a kiddo got sent out of class. I think a lot of districts have this. So they turned that into every morning, like a check-in with those students. So they would log in and help them do school. So could we connect them with a group like that, so that they have a teacher online working with them through some of these things? And then, of course, we do talk to the parents about their childcare needs, about their physical needs, and we do serve the whole family. So we're trying to problem solve for them as well. And the approach just remains, we get it, we understand that this is really hard for you, and we're just really glad that you're talking to us and that you're letting us know what your concerns are.
I'm actually going to type right now into the chat box, because I love this so much. Unconditional positive regard was the phrase that you used, and I've heard that before. I think we could all use some of that most of the time, so that's really good. I have a question that's probably really hard for you to answer, but I'm just going to throw it out and see what you think. The question is, how many staff are involved in all of your efforts? And I think it's a hard question because you have so many collaborations. But maybe if you could talk a little bit about, your staffing and if you think there are any suggestions that you might give to a district that maybe doesn't have a program like the Maslow Project. And so they might not have as much staff as you do.
Totally. So the way that we break it down is obviously a full-time position based on how many potential McKinney-Vento students are in that district. So we have like one staff per identified, like 300 to 400, I believe, knowing that you're not going to be working with all 400 of those at one time, but that some of those will rise to the surface. And part of our staff's job is to make the community collaborations so that there is more support for the families and students. And so we do have a lot of staff. Yes, we have a lot of staff to help work with families, but where it really comes down to it is knowing who in the school is the best person to then refer kids or families to. So a lot of it is also referring out. And so where we've gotten creative in some of our districts where we have less staff is working with the like Check and Connect or positive attendance support folks to help us do outreach. They've kind of reassigned staff certain roles during COVID. So kind of asking who can most appropriately help you reach out to families. And if you already know who those people are, that's great. But sometimes school district staff are looking for something extra to do and might have a little extra time on their hands. So I would choose the people who have a lot of interaction with students in general.
That's great. Thank you. It's super helpful. We have a couple of questions about the name of the funding that I mentioned earlier, so I'm just going to type that into the chat box. But in the meantime, this is a really great and specific question. What about chargers? What about people who don't have any place to charge the devices? How are you handling that?
Yes. So we have purchased solar chargers for some of our kids and families. We also try to get creative with where they can go that's a public place that's not going to be dangerous for them to be able to charge their devices. And if that is their specific concern, they will be first on the list to go to LIPI, limited in-person instruction.
Okay. Because
of an access need. So those are kind of how we're prioritizing. So solar chargers are an option. And so we use McKinney dollars to buy stuff like that as it's needed. Finding places in the community, so like if a library has public hours that they can go and charge there. Sometimes we'll combine it with a place like where they might be able to get a community meal. We'll say, hey, this is the time when they're serving a community meal that's close to you. Maybe you can go and charge your things there, and suggest that they use that as an opportunity. It's kind of getting creative with wherever they are. We have had some families who are camping and they don't have hookups. So in those circumstances, we're doing a lot of like dropping off paper packets and work and stuff like that. It's just not feasible for them to do a lot of, if they can come in and drive in, we'll provide gas money or something for them to drive in once a week to log in and connect with teachers and get a gist of things, maybe pick up their packet and then go back out to wherever they're staying, or even just like physically delivering it sometimes.
Okay, great. Very good. Yeah, I mean, this is all about creativity at this point in our pandemic. So a couple of people are asking for information about how you document your outreach and your case management, and even asking maybe if you have any forms that you use that you would share. So I don't know how you do that, and if it's anything that you could maybe get to me that I could share out, or you might just be on a database. I don't know how you're exactly doing it.
So our documenting for so if it's a case management program that you're running and you're wanting to know kind of some of our tools and things that we use, you just share my email address out and you can contact me directly so I can learn a little bit about what your program does so I know how to respond to that.
Okay.
For our home visits, like most of the time we have sort of an internal checklist of what we're going to ask, like to be able to know what we're going to go over when we meet with a student and check off basic needs, technology, safety, food, school supplies, whatever the thing is that we need. And we just take it with us. And so that we know
Okay.
we have these things to give, and they can have whatever they need, and we track it like what we've given out.
That
I
sounds
don't know
like
if that
a
answers the
pretty,
question.
I think it does. It sounds like a pretty helpful checklist too. So I did put your email address in the chat box since you gave me permission to do that. So if anyone wants to get Fallon's email address, it is in the chat box right now. And I think we have really time probably for just one question. So one quick one, is there a particular brand of solar charger that you recommend from someone who's planning to buy some but isn't sure exactly which one to buy?
I will have to look and see what we have used. It doesn't come to mind right off the top of my head, but email me, whoever that was. Just email me that question and I'll get back to you.
All right, thank you. And then my last question, even though we're at time, but I think this is a really fun question, so I want to ask it anyway. How are you celebrating accomplishments of your students? You know, mental health is so important right now, and I know you love to do this, so I know you want to answer this one. Tell me how you celebrate with the students.
Oh my gosh, we celebrate in so many ways. My staff are given pretty much the green light to like do what it is that the kid really wants or is asking for. So we had this one kid who really wanted these super fancy steel-toed boots, which is obviously a big purchase, but they reached a really cool goal, so we said go for it. We'll do incentive, just like little coffee cards, like celebratory. A lot of it's really just organic. Like if they didn't like specifically weren't on a goal plan and earned it, it's so much fun for them to be recognized. Just to say, hey, oh my God, I saw that you logged in every day this week. High five, I'm dropping you off a coffee. Like you don't even get to tell me you don't want one. Like, like we're gonna celebrate you. So I think the intention behind that is seeking to see where they actually have been successful, where they may not be expecting you to give them that thumbs up. And intrinsically for some kids, just your recognition might be enough. But for other kids, it might be like, oh my gosh, and they dropped me off like a Mod Pizza gift card. This is so exciting. So we celebrate all sorts of ways. And a lot of times it's just getting to know the kid and what's going to really make them happy.
That is awesome. I think that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Fallon, for being with us today. Thank you, everyone who attended, for your questions and your input. We will be back next Thursday with another conversation. And Fallon, again, I just really appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys all have a great day.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye.